Good afternoon, everyone. Let us start the event in a while. We are just waiting for a few of the attendees to join and we'll kick it off. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today's webinar. My name is Zeeshan Qureshi, and I'm the director of INIT, and I'll be your host for today. Before we start, just a few reminders for everyone, for our audiences. Please feel free to ask questions anytime through the Q&A option available in the tool. Our speakers will be available to answer your questions at the end of the session. We will be also sharing the link to book your free security assessment slot in the end of the webinar. So do stay till the end so that you can have access to that link and you can register that slot. So let me run you through today's agenda. We are honored to have Kevin Lowe with us. He is Associate Security Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services, and he will be speaking about the AWS Best Security Practices. After Kevin, we will have our special guest speaker, Mr. Ejaz Anwer, the Head of Technology at Abhi Private Limited, who will be sharing his experience and also guiding the audience that what it takes to ensure the security of a startup. Then we will have Junaid and Abdullah Hafeez, the solutions architects of INIT. They will deep dive the AWS security portfolio for better understanding. Lastly, we will have Q&A session with all our panelists along with the closing remarks, and we highly encourage everyone to participate. A little bit about INIT. We are a technology company which develops software products for different industries. We are AWS consulting partner and have been working closely with AWS startups team in Pakistan. So far, we have performed consultation and launched more than 22 startups in Pakistan covering different industry verticals. These are few of our startups with which we are working. Let's now start today's program. Kevin Lowe is an Associate Security Solutions Architect with Amazon Web Services. He is passionate about security and helps businesses of all sizes and across a wide range of industries throughout ASEAN build securely on AWS to keep them and their customers safe. Without further delay, let us all welcome Kevin.
Hi everyone, let me just get started by sharing my screen. There we go. All right, terrific. So like what Zeeshan said, if anyone has any questions during the presentation itself, feel free to put them into the chat. I'll try and address them after this session is complete. So good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'll be taking you through some security best practices on AWS. Over the next 25 to 30 minutes, I plan to share some practical tips that you can implement into your environment today to improve your security posture and help you build securely on AWS. So, thinking about security has become extremely pressing. We're now connecting all virtually, we're working online, and being able to store your data and run your workloads in a safe and secure manner is of paramount importance. Now, what happens when you get security wrong? According to Cybercrime magazine, cybercrime will cost the world $10.5 trillion annually by 2025, and that is $190 per second. So that's why today I want to give you really practical steps that you can take to protect yourself from bad actors out there. So at AWS, security is always our #1 priority. For us, it's job zero. Nothing is more important. If the right security isn't in place, we and you for your customers don't have an experience that works, and we don't have a business. So security could not be more fundamental or mission critical. And my goal is to help you build securely so you can protect both yourself and your end customers. Furthermore, we believe that security shouldn't be expensive. Security should be something that is available, easily available, and cost effective for you as a customer. And we want you to start building securely first, rather than building a whole very nice application and then only adding your security features as an afterthought, usually after a security incident. So for today's session, I'll be kicking off with the shared responsibility model. Then I'll talk a bit about security culture and security architecture. Then we'll dive into the best practices across these different domains. So when we talk about security at AWS, we always start with the shared responsibility model. So this is what a typical on-premises security model looks like. And with this model, customers are responsible for the end-to-end security of their data centers. So everything from the hardware to the physical hardware, all the way up to customer data that is used by application is the customer's responsibility. And you can imagine that can be quite challenging for customers. When you move to AWS, security becomes a shared responsibility. So AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. This is the physical infrastructure. And the customer is responsible for the security of the cloud. This is things like ensuring your customer data is encrypted, ensuring your EC2 instances are patched, and things like that. But what is also important to remember is that the line for this shared responsibility does vary. So if you look at infrastructure services like EC2, they are definitely more customizable, but you as a customer needs to take a greater responsibility to secure it. Moving on to container services, and when I talk about container services, I don't just mean things like ECS or EKS, but also more managed services like Amazon RDS. For these services, AWS takes slightly more responsibility and handles things like platform and application management and patching. Finally, for abstracted services like S3, Lambda, and DynamoDB, AWS takes even more responsibility. So what this means is that for abstracted services, they are less customizable, but that also means that there's less customer responsibility for you and more best practices built in. So it's very important as you build your different applications using different services, you need to be aware of where the line falls for the services you are using so you can take the right steps as a customer. Now, moving on, when we talk about security, we don't just want to talk about tools, but we also need to talk both about security culture as well. So let's start with security culture. Now, like what I mentioned, security isn't just about buying the most expensive or the most fancy tools, but also about cultures and mechanisms that help you and your team build securely. So here are some questions to get you thinking about where your security culture is right now and perhaps maybe what you need to do to improve it. So the first question, who is accountable for security? So the person who's accountable is the person who's taking charge and taking ownership for your whole security, for the security of your environment. This person will ensure that what is supposed to happen will happen from a security standpoint. The next question, who is responsible for security? Now notice that this can refer to two different people, and the people responsible for security are the people who are actually implementing security policies or guardrails. Now, depending on your organization, this may not be someone in your company. It could be a third-party application, a software as a service, or a partner. Now, are you building a collaborative security culture? So a collaborative security culture is one where there's an atmosphere where employees or your team members feel safe about informing or escalating early when they identify potential security issues. How that is very helpful is that when your developers or your system administrators see a security issue, they feel comfortable escalating to the security team so that it gets resolved. So are you building a culture where everyone takes responsibility for security and feels comfortable bringing security issues up? Next, do you have a cloud security strategy? So security on the cloud is it's different from on-premises security. So does your security team know how to use cloud native tools? And is your governance approach fit for concepts like serverless or software as a service? I've seen many customers just try and take their on-premises security approach or security strategy and bring it to the cloud. Of course, that's still better than having no security strategy at all, but it's definitely not the most effective. Now, next is what security processes do you have? Like, do you regularly inspect and analyze your security posture? Do you collect data about your processes? And do you have a process where you iteratively improve your security? Do you document and write down all your security plans? And do you test your incident response? All these security processes contribute to building a really strong security culture. Finally, how do you keep up to date with security threats and recommendations? What's important to remember is that security isn't just a one and done kind of thing. You need to, after setting up your initial security strategy or policy or posture, you always need to keep up to date and improve it in response to new security threats. So do you have a process or way to keep up to date with these threats, either by reading social media forums or looking at blogs? Now, a program that some of our customers have implemented to improve their security is called a Security Guardian or Security Champion program. These security guardians are people who sit outside the security organization, so they're not part of the security team, but they volunteer to help maintain best practices within individual teams. So what this means, it could be like, for example, you have a development team and you have one developer who volunteers to be a security guardian. So when you do this, when you embed these security champions or security guardians within your team, and you give them a seat at the table as to how security and their team can work together, this will provide you huge value. Because security team, they may know a lot about security, but they may not know a lot about development. So it will be much more effective for a development person to come out and say, yeah, maybe this is how we should do security for my team. So you should definitely consider starting this kind of program internally, and more will be shared at reInvent this year as well. So that covers security culture. Now let's move on to security architecture and best practices, starting with identity and access management. So the first best practice has to do with separating workloads across multiple accounts. These multiple accounts should be managed by AWS organizations. So let's start off with a management account. The management account runs AWS organizations and other services like Control Tower and Single Sign-On. Then you should also consider using a log archive account. So the reason for this is to store your logs safely and securely. Then you want to centralize your operations. This could be a central security operations account with services like Security Hub and Guard Duty. Then we have our workload accounts where we can run our applications. We want separate accounts for development and also for production. So this is what a kind of a basic multi-account structure will look like. Now, you may be wondering, why is it important to separate workloads using accounts? Well, firstly, separating workloads with accounts adds another layer of separation for your permissions. Take, for example, the log archive account. It's very important to keep your logs safe and prevent people from touching it. So by having a separate account, you are denying everyone except a very limited set of people access into the account itself. Secondly, separating workloads reduces the blast radius for any incident. So let's say, for example, you have your developer in your development account, he was building something and he accidentally did something really bad and the whole account goes down, maybe it gets suspended for something. But since your production resources are kept safe in a separate account, they are unaffected and your customers don't notice a thing. Now, when you have multiple accounts and manage them with AWS organizations, you can also use what is called service control policies to become guardrails. So service control policies are special policies that you can attach to individual accounts or groups of accounts called organizational units, and they provide guardrails that you can restrict what your team can do in each account. So for example, the policy you see on the screen denies the ability for any user or role in the account to create access keys on new users. This is true even if the user or role has admin permissions. Service control policies can be very useful to deny things that you never want anyone in your team doing. Like for example, you never want any of your team turning off CloudTrail logging. So you set up a service control policy that denies that. Moving on to identities now. So the first best practice we have for identities is to rely on a centralized identity provider. You want to centralize your identities because you don't want to have multiple IAM users in each individual account, which can be very difficult to manage. And you also don't want to have to manage multiple cross-account roles. So centralizing with something with AWS SSO will help you manage your identities more securely and more conveniently. Furthermore, another great thing about AWS SSO is that a lot of companies have a corporate identity provider. This could be something like Google Workspaces, Okta, or Microsoft Active Directory. You want to avoid a situation where you have one set of identities in your corporate directory and another set of IAM users in AWS. This can be very difficult to manage, especially when people leave the company or just move to different roles within the company. So for example, imagine if one of your developers resigned angrily. So you deleted them from maybe your Google Workspaces directory, but you forgot to delete their user in AWS. He then logs into your environment and angrily deletes your production database. That's a really bad thing for you to happen. The next thing you want to do is you always want to use strong sign-in mechanisms. So I cannot stress this enough. Make sure you turn multi-factor authentication or MFA on and protect your root user. Apart from that, you should rotate your passwords and enforce the password policies for users as well. Finally, you also want to audit the credentials that you have. Make sure that if there are any old credentials, you delete them or cycle them. Apart from that, you should always try and use temporary rather than permanent credentials. If you're using something like single sign-on, your human users are using temporary credentials. But what about your machine identities? If you're running an application on an EC2 instance, use roles instead of hard-coding permanent credentials into your application. By default, temporary credentials expire every 12 hours. The second thing is to store and use secrets securely. Often, your application will need secrets, things like database connection strings, for example. One mistake a lot of our customers make is that they hard code or write these secrets into the application or store it in a configuration file that is then committed to the repository. This is very bad because can you imagine the damage that would happen if someone gains access to your production database connection information? Instead, you should use a service like AWS Secrets Manager or Systems Manager Parameter Store to securely store these secrets and only access them when needed. Secrets Manager is especially useful as it allows for automatic secret rotation. Overall, the goal is to avoid long-lived credentials and automate this process as much as you can. We don't want any unnecessary IAM users or access keys just lying around. Finally, for permissions now. When you have multiple accounts, you often need to share resources across these accounts. AWS Resource Access Manager helps you securely share your resources across AWS accounts and within your AWS organization. Furthermore, you also want to analyze public access and cross-account access to grant least privilege. You can do this with AWS IAM Access Analyzer or IAM Access Advisor. Now, the last thing for IAM today is to use IAM policy condition keys. Now, condition keys are a very useful way to ensure that you only grant least privileged access. The policy will only work if the user will only be able to take the action if the condition is fulfilled. So let's look at this one, for example. There's an effect of allow for this specific role, and the action is to get a bucket, to get a bucket location and get an object. We have a specific resource already, so this is a very scoped down policy. But finally, we have a condition policy called called via Athena. So this means that only if this get object or get bucket location call is made by Amazon Athena will this be allowed. So apart from called via, you can also use other conditions like tags, time of day, or even geolocation as conditions. And this allows you to get very granular and prevent yourself from giving too many permissions to your users. Now, moving on from IAM, next one we have detection. So the first best practice with detection is to configure service and application logging to log to a central log archive account. So for example, in this diagram here, you have Security Hub, Config, Guard Duty, and CloudTrail all pushing logs to the log archive account and also pushing findings to the operations account. At the application level, we want to configure logging at both the application and operating system layer. And this can be done on instances with CloudWatch and the CloudWatch agent. For Aurora, we can enable database logging to go to CloudWatch. And for Lambda, it can also push logs to CloudWatch as well. All these CloudWatch logs can be configured to be pushed to the log archive account where they will be kept safe. So that's for logging. The next best practice is with regards to detection is to turn Amazon Guard Duty on. So there are a few services that you should turn on in your accounts to improve your security. They all integrate very well with AWS organizations, and we can start off with Guard Duty. So Guard Duty is a fully managed threat detection service that continuously monitors your AWS accounts and workloads for malicious activity and delivers findings for you to take action on. So after a single click deployment, it's really very easy. Guard Duty begins analyzing VPC flow logs, CloudTrail management event logs, S3 data plane events, and DNS logs. And then it uses threat detection or threat intelligence feeds provided by Proofpoint and FireEye to detect things like Bitcoin mining and command and control activity. It also analyzes your environment with machine learning to detect unusual user behavior and unusual traffic patterns. And when it detects this, it automatically sorts the findings by priority for you to quickly take action. So with Guard Duty, you can be alerted when there's abnormal activity in your account and you can take action very quickly. Now the next service that's useful is Security Hub. So Security Hub has this thing called foundational checks, and it helps you verify your architecture and what you're running. After turning Security Hub on, and you can easily turn the checks on as well, it'll give you a security score. And as you resolve these issues, your security score will slowly improve. This gives you a quantifiable way to measure your improved security. Now, the last service that's very useful for detection is AWS Config. So AWS Config has this feature called conformance packs. These conformance packs provide a set of rules that represent the ideal state of your infrastructure. AWS Config will track the configuration changes that occur among your resources and will flag resources that violate your rules. So for example, on the slide, you see the sample template there is operational best practices for the well-architected security pillar. And maybe one of the configuration rules is that you should never have you should never have an S3 bucket open to the public. So if one of your developers accidentally creates an S3 bucket and forgets to turn off and forgets to set it to block public access, you will automatically be notified. And if you want to go to the next level, you can configure automatic remediation as well. Now, there are many conformance packs available online for a variety of compliance requirements and best practices, and you can also create your own ones to suit the needs of your organization. The last tip for detection is to implement actionable security events. You need to ensure that you are alerted when your detective services detect something. There's no point detecting things, but your security team is unaware of what's going on. So on the slide in front of you, you see this is a webhook for Guard Duty that automatically sends messages to Amazon Chime when a finding comes up. So more than just being alerted, you want to make the alert actionable as well. Because sometimes, I mean, I'm sure you all are aware, when you are going through hundreds of emails, an email like this may get lost. So using platforms like Chime or Slack can be very helpful, as your security team can respond in a thread and keep everyone updated. It would be also ideal if you added action items for your team in the alert. So it could be the run book to take, the person that needs to respond to this. So in the slide in front of you, you can see that they have a run book linked, and you can escalate per the escalation process. This ensures that your incident responders know what to do. And if you want to go to the next level, you can even make your response automated. So you can automate your run book, or even just automate your whole response. That would be even better. So that covers all of detection. Now moving on to let's quickly move on to infrastructure protection. So what we want to do is to create or implement network layers. We want a multiple layered strategy. It's like an onion. The more an attacker gets into your environment, the more your attacker is going to cry. So let's say you have an internet user and he wants to access your environment. He resolves DNS through route 53. You can configure logging on route 53 so you get an insight into who is looking up DNS requests. Then the traffic will go to CloudFront. And CloudFront is integrated with AWS Web Application Firewall. So even before they touch your VPC, there's already a multi-layered defense with edge services that scale across the globe. Then we will build out our VPC. So first, we have an application load balancer layer. This is in a public subnet and it's accessible from the internet. Then we have a demilitarized zone or shared layer. If our application needs to reach the internet, this is where the NAT gateway can live. Then we have an application layer. Now note that this is in a private subnet and has no internet access at all. The only way you can reach your instances is through the load balancer layer, through CloudFront, and through the web application firewall. Then we have our database layer. The database layer has no internet connectivity at all. It doesn't reach out to the internet or accept connections from the internet. It only accepts connections from the application layer. After that, you want to control traffic to all layers. You can do this through security groups, network access control lists, and route tables. So as you can see from what we have already, if a threat actor wanted to get into your database, it is going to be very, very difficult. He can't access it from the internet. You're going to have to go through many, many different layers. Now, the next thing you want to do is implement inspection and protection. And here is where you can configure agent-based or partner solutions. Now, to make it easier to manage and configure all of this, what we recommend is that you can use CloudFormation to stand up all this infrastructure and deploy secure templates. And the last thing I want you to note for this diagram now is that notice that even though my instances are in a private subnet, I have no bastion host to connect to them. So how do I connect to them? You can use what we call, you can use a service called Systems Manager, Session Manager to connect straight into your EC2 instances without a bastion host. This is much more secure. Moving on, we also want to reduce the attack surface and perform vulnerability management. This can be done with Amazon Inspector to look at vulnerabilities and exposures for EC2 instances. And we want to build hardened and secure images with EC2 Image Builder. Now, if you're using containers, don't worry. Amazon ECR also provides image scanning abilities. Now, let's talk about data protection. So data protection is very, very important. You have to protect your customers' data to keep their trust. And when we talk about data protection, the first thing you need to think about is whether you need to even store the data in the first place. If it's something that you don't need to store, if it's something that you don't need to keep, just don't store it. And either that or don't grant access to the data. If you do need to store it, think about how you can encrypt, mask, or tokenize it. Thirdly, you want to eliminate human access to prevent any accidental use of the data or touching of the data. You can think of the tooling you can use to ensure that there is no human access. And now, how do we ensure that this is enforced throughout our whole environment? We recommend using things like operations as code to stand up your environments. So why operations as code is so important is because if you have a system administrator or cloud architect setting up your environment, clicking through the console manually, it could lead to accidental misconfiguration. That system administrator might accidentally leave an S3 bucket open to the world. But if you use infrastructure as code, you can rest assured that there will be no mistakes. Now, the next thing you want to do is you need to know the data you're storing. Now, AWS, we have a service called Amazon Macy that can help you identify the data within your workload and let you know if you have personally identifiable information where you're not supposed to. Then you want to think about how you're doing encryption and how you manage your keys. Keys can be managed using KMS, and turning on encryption is as easy as a checkbox in many of our services. Finally, for data in transit, you can enable no-cost certificates both in CloudFront and the application load balancer using AWS Certificate Manager. This will encrypt data in transit using TLS. Finally, you also want to enforce and make sure that when your developers or engineers are building anything, they definitely turn encryption on to protect data security. So you want to enable and enforce default encryption, and you can use IAM rules to enforce these requirements. For example, you can configure an IAM rule to deny any creation of an S3 bucket unless to only allow the creation of any S3 bucket only if encryption is turned on using the conditional keys that we talked about earlier. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about today is incident response. You've set everything up perfectly already, but there will inevitably be incidents. Things will always happen no matter how well you set things up. So what we need to do is have some good practices for incident response procedures. The first best practice is to develop an incident management plan or incident response plan. It's very important to have an incident response and escalation plan in the form of a runbook or playbook. Now, a runbook or a playbook provides a guide for incident responders during an incident. This helps you so that your security team won't be lost trying to figure out what they need to do. Instead, they have a runbook to follow and they can quickly follow the steps. So on the screen in front of you is an example of what a runbook will look like. As you can see, there's a scenario title, a description, what the security operations team need to do, when they need to escalate, and how to resolve it. So the amount of preparation, how many different runbooks you need, depends on your industry and risk appetite. If you're just getting started, I recommend you can just start by having a simple playbook or runbook and then expanding from there. And AWS, we've also open sourced a couple of runbooks you can find in the link as well. Now you have your incident responders know what to do. But what's also important is you must pre-provision access and tools. It's useless to have incident responders very well trained, but maybe can't access the account that they need to access. So if you have a security operations account, have your playbook stored there along with your other tools. If you have logs that you need to see in S3 that you need access to, you can use Amazon Athena to query those logs. Lambda can be used to do some automated remediation steps. And in the security operations account, you have services like Security Hub, Guard Duty, and Detective for further root cause analysis. And finally, you want to ensure that your operations account has the roles for the incident response team to reach into the other accounts to take remediative action. Can you imagine what if your development account got locked out because someone accessed it and your incident response team doesn't have the right role to access that account anymore? That would be terrible. Now, the last thing is that you need to test and run game days to test out your incident response process. It's very important to test your incident response in your teams so that each member of your team knows how to act and what to do in an incident. It's like playing a sport. You don't just show up to the football field, or you don't just show up to the court and pretend that you know what you're gonna do or you know how your team is going to play. You need to practice and get your security muscles strong so you make sure that your team knows how to respond to a real incident. These tests are what we at AWS call game days, and there's 6 simple steps that you can see on the screen. You just want to schedule time, you want to incentivize people by finding a prize. If you can, supply food and drinks. And a good way to get started is pick a guard duty finding and try to work through the whole incident response process. And finally, after you finish that testing of that procedure, you look at your performance and improve accordingly. Now, in summary, today I've covered quite a few things. So I just want to summarize by saying the first thing you want to do is you want to be aware of your shared responsibility for the services you are using. You want to start to build a strong security culture, and you want to improve your security architecture with the tips I shared with you across these different domains. So I hope you learned something today. Thank you so much for taking the time to improve your security. And I really appreciate your feedback. So I'll drop this link in the chat. I really appreciate if you could fill out a simple survey. and let me know your feedback. Now, I'll pass the time back to Zeeshan.
Thank you, Kevin, for such a wonderful session. You have set the right foundation for their understanding to the AWS security. So thanks again. Moving to our next speaker, Ejaz Anwer is the head of technology at Abhi Private Limited. Abhi Private Limited is a fintech based startup in Pakistan. He has been the brain who designed and oversee the implementation of end-to-end integrated systems in AWS serverless architecture model at Abhi. He brings more than 20 years of experience and has worked with various top companies within Pakistan and abroad, which includes names like Mubashir Media, Infotech, NetSol. He holds a master's degree in computer science. So let us all welcome Ejaz.
Thank you very much, Zeeshan, for the introduction. Allow me to share my screen.
Yeah, sure.
So I hope you are all able to see my desktop, right?
Yes, it's clear.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much and welcome to this session. Before I dive into the security aspects, allow me to explain how we started and how we ended up where we are. We are a fintech startup. We started our development in April this year. Before that, from everything from idea inception to the our first release in the production. Our original estimate was for the 3 months, which is actually quite an ambitious target. We were late about 2 weeks, and by 15th July, we put our system into the production. So in this 3.5 months, we did all the development and all the security aspects that Kevin has just explained. We implemented almost 90% of them, if not 100, and then gradually we improve onto them. So when it comes to the security, basically security has to be part of the application design. So as a startup, basically the problem is that we have limited resources. And just as I mentioned that we had a timeline of 3 months. So more or less we all are in this kind of situations, right? And at times we find ourselves where we have to make compromises. But unfortunately, security is something that we cannot actually put at the back burner. And it's not only about the tools that are available out there and we just configure them and that's all. Security has to be also part of the application design right from the beginning. Because it's not only your application that you'll be working on. You will be working with different third parties. You will be integrating with them. So the security measures that you will be implementing, either they will be impacting them or their security measures would also be applicable at you. So if we, let's say, the sooner we implement all of these security guidelines and principles in place, the better the chances are that we won't have to come up with the operational issues or the challenges at the time of going live. So moving on with the general recommendation, this is not only for the startup, but in general for any organization, is that first is to define the information security role in the organization and assign this role to a person, even if you are a startup of 2 person, because this essentially means that you will put a person who you will be blaming if, let's say, anything goes wrong. When it comes to security, we must have to realize that security is a reactive process. We always come to know when it is breached, when already something happens, right? So this actually makes it a continuous process. So it's not just one-time kind of thing that, okay, we just made all this security implementation and that's all, let's move on. Tomorrow we will be working on new services, new product line, and there will be continuous pressure of delivering the results to the production. Which means that there will be a very rapid delivery cycles. There will be more and more services that we will be acquiring either from the cloud service provider or any other third party. So security has to be evaluated with the evolution of the system. This means that we also need to define a organizational security framework. So I will come back to this in more detail after a couple of slides. So a good starting point, just as Kevin also mentioned, and we also went through, was to actually first to understand the AWS shared responsibility model, where overall security and compliance is shared between the AWS and the organization. So basically, we need to understand where the line ends, what will be managed by the AWS and what we have to manage ourselves. So it's kind of a joint exercise. We can't push everything to the cloud vendor and we can't take everything on ourselves. So this is why actually we are going to the cloud at the first place, right? So this shared model helps relieve the customer operational burdens as AWS operates, manage, and control the components from host operating systems and virtualization layers down to the physical security of the facilities in which these services operate. Okay. So the customer assumes responsibility and manage of the guest operating systems, including updates and security patches, other associated application softwares, as well as the configuration of the AWS provided security groups and firewalls. So this is actually is all about the AWS shared responsibility model. Once we have a good understanding of this model, this can help us to define what we can say is the organization's security framework. What this framework is, that it defines that how we will implement the security across our entire system end to end. And all of these points that Kevin just run through, we need to have a proactive kind of approach that what will be our action, how will we implement this if, let's say, this kind of things happen. So these are the 9 general high-level areas. So they varies from organization to organization, but at bare minimum, this is what I would recommend to startups or the other organizations to look into that and come up with their the security framework that they can implement and monitor it on a regular basis. So starting with this first key process area is the governance. So what is meant by the governance? Basically, it comprises the elements required to provide senior management assurance that its direction and intent are reflected in the security posture of the organization. Basically, this is what it's all about. It means understanding which AWS services that the organization has purchased, what kind of systems and information that the organization plans to use with the AWS services, and what policies, procedures, and plans apply to these services. So this is mostly, and then this actually revolves around implementation and inventory, risk assessment, IT security programs, policies, service provider oversight. So these are the sub areas that actually come under this key process area. Then the second part is regarding the network configurations and management. So this is where actually network management in AWS is very similar to network management on-prem, except that the network components such as firewalls and routers are actually virtual. So missing or inappropriately configured security controls related to the external access and the network security can actually result in security exposure. So this is the quite vital area, and usually is for the DevOps and the network operations and control people in the organization. Then the next is the assets configurations and management. So AWS customers are responsible for maintaining the security of anything they install or connect to their AWS resources. So secure management of the organization AWS resources means knowing what resources is using, like and secure and are they securely configured, like the guest operating systems and applications on the customer resources. And as we proceed with the development, we will be adding more and more services. Basically, that will be providing the services in form of the product and services of the organization. So basically, change management control will be vital in this area. That must have to be part of this organization security framework. Followed by logical access control. So basically, this determines not only who or what can have access to a specific system resources, but the type of actions that can be performed on the resources, like read, write, etc. The policies that Kevin just run through. So this portion focuses on identifying how users and permissions are set up in the AWS for the services being used by the organization. So then data encryption. So how basically data is stored in AWS and although data is stored in AWS is secure by default. Only AWS owners have the access to AWS resources they create. However, in case of some customers who have sensitive data, they may require additional protection by encrypting the data when it is stored on the AWS. So basically, this key process area needs to define the measures that how that data will be secured and how much actually it is applicable to us. And then security logging and monitoring. Audit logs basically record a variety, in AWS record a wide variety occurring within the organization information system and network. So this is where actually we need to put the alerts and assign them to various people in the team, the logging of all the events in various categories, so that if anything is happening, we are notified promptly and the expected action can be taken. Security incident reporting, just as Kevin already covered that, this is about ensuring that the organization incident response plan and policy for the cybersecurity incidents include AWS services and addresses controls that mitigate cybersecurity incidents and recoveries. And then is the disaster recovery. Okay, so although AWS provides a highly available infrastructure that allows customers to architect resilient applications and quickly respond to major incidents or disaster scenarios, however, the organizations to ensure that they configure systems that require high availability or quick recovery time to take advantage of the multiple regions and availability zones that AWS offers. And finally is about the inherited controls. So basically, AWS data centers are housed in non-descriptive facilities. Physical access is strictly controlled both at the perimeters and at building ingress points by professional security staff utilizing video surveillance, intrusion detection systems, and other electronic means. This implies that understanding of how an organization can request and evaluate third-party attestations and certification in order to gain reasonable assurance of the design and operating effectiveness of the control objectives. In case of many companies or the startups, there are various compliances that may require to provide such evidences of the physical security. So basically, these are the essential areas that should be covered as part of the organization security framework. However, as a startup, we may not need all of them right from the day one. And startups has their own challenges. We have limited resources, very ambitious targets all the time, right? And we actually, and it takes time for us to get up to a certain point, basically. But having this framework already in place will help the organization to refer to something rather than acting as just passively. Like if something happens, then we start thinking that, okay, what should we be doing now? So this can help all the team and the organization to refer to come up with various kind of checklisted for audits. Based upon that, we also did our first internal penetration testing. Then we engaged third parties. Our internal pen testing was white box. Then we went for the black box and gray box with the external parties. So that if we have this this framework in form of checklist, it can regularly help us to validate our security measures that we have implemented as we proceed and we scale up our applications over the period of time. So this is all from my side. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and I will be happy to respond.
Thanks a lot, Ejaz. I think that was a wonderful session and a very, I would say, extremely beneficial piece of advice. I really endorse your comments that all the startups, especially in Pakistan, they are like reactive. They go for like leveraging or adopting new AWS services which are trending, but the negligence is there when it comes to the security, and this has all happened when you don't have a proper framework laid in from the day one. As I mentioned to the words of Ejaz, it is not necessary that you perform each and every checklist from day one, but at least you should have a plan laid down, so that you have the remedy already planned in front of you and not create any chaos. We are already seeing in the market, in our financial sector marketing, how the cyber attacks thing is actually messing up. So it's a suggestion to every startup to take care of the security elements from day one, and then they can start leveraging at the advanced level. So thank you again, Ejaz. So moving to our next speakers, I would like to invite the solution architects from the team INIT. They both have been working with various startups for the last 1 year almost. Junaid brings experience from the infrastructure side, while Abdullah is into the development track. They will be giving us an overview about the key AWS security services, which could play a vital role during the implementation. So over to you guys.
Can you please allow me to share my screen? Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Abdullah. As Zeeshan already introduced us, me and Junaid, we work as a solution architect at INIT, and we have a same role here. Today, we will discuss about the security services provided by the AWS to secure our cloud. As Kevin has already covered few of them, and we will take a deep dive into a few of them. So though there are many services, so we cannot discuss all of them here, but we have cherry-picked few of them for you guys. So let's get started into it. Okay, so the first one we have here is guard duty. As Kevin also said, that it is a continuous mechanism to monitor your environment for threat detections. So because analyzing log data manually is a time-consuming task, and you have to dedicate a security team for it specifically. So how guard duty solves this problem? It analyzes your logs such as VPC flow logs, CloudTrail events, DNS logs, and intelligently, so it can prioritize it accordingly. This service also utilizes machine learning anomaly detection, as Kevin also said, that you can identify your if someone is trying to access your environment or utilizing your resources for Bitcoin mining or any sort of minings. So features this service provides is the number one we have here is account level detection. You can accurately detect threat detection on your account levels if you have multiple accounts, multiple AWS accounts. So for example, if someone is trying to access your resource or your EC2 instance from your from unusual geolocation or using unusual API, so it can detect and alert you for that finding. Next, we have is continuous monitoring. You can continuously monitor and analyze your AWS environment, the data it scans, and for example, the data in CloudTrail, VPC flow logs. It also provides threat level detections. These are built-in detection techniques. For example, unusual patterns of failed login attempts. If someone is trying to, how it works, like if they have, it is a built-in detection technique. So it identifies it if someone is using unusual patterns of failed or unauthorized login attempts. For another technique we have here is in threat detection is instance compromise. If, for example, you are getting high-level traffic and temporary credentials are using, so it can notify you that on instance level. As for S3 buckets, it goes same, like if someone is trying to access with unauthorized keys or trying to get unauthorized access from malicious IP. So you can notified about that too. So as it has security levels like low, high, and medium priorities, so it can prioritize them accordingly. The feature this service provides is you can automate your response workflow by using CloudWatch events. Like you can also use Lambda function to trigger Lambda functions on any specific CloudWatch event. So you can configure that, and it will automatically respond using your AWS Lambda function. And this service is highly available. It adds and reduces capacity units itself, and you do not have to manage any compute resource or any kind of resource for using guard duty. And it is one-click deployment. You just have to enable it in your region, in your VPC, and that's it. You can also use a guard duty for your multiple AWS accounts. The benefits by using guard duty is you get 24/7 monitoring and up-to-date intelligence. Like these resources and these techniques get updated for the latest availability of for example, unusual patterns and everything else. Another benefit you have is there's automated. You can automate the complete process by using Lambda function, as I told earlier, and it reduces your recovery time, so you can recover quickly as possible. Number 3, you can use multiple accounts, and the last point here is you can manage multiple accounts from single guard duty administrator console. Like you do not have to go on another account to monitor their guard duty findings. You can access all of them on a single guard duty console. The pricing for this, it usually is charged on the events it scan, like the VPC flow logs and the amount of data you have in your VPC flow logs and CloudTrail events. So for example, you will be charged for 1 million requests. If you get 1 million requests in a period of 1 month, you will be charged $4.6, which is inexpensive, very inexpensive. So let's move to the AWS config. So Junaid, what do you say? What you have for the AWS config? Can you please briefly explain to us?
Okay, Abdullah. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So AWS security portfolio includes services from pillars of AWS security, which Kevin and Abdullah have discussed. So let's get an overview of AWS config, which lie under detective controls, as Kevin mentioned. So AWS config continuously monitors and records your AWS resource configurations and allow you to automate the evaluation of recorded configurations against the desired configurations. So you can define policies and guidelines for your AWS environment, and you can receive notifications whenever a resource deviates from these rules. And if non-compliant resource discovered with the AWS config automatic remediation, you can get back to compliant and secure static. अगर हम इसको उर्दू में समझें तो AWS config कंटिन्यूसली आपकी जो रिसोर्सेज और कॉन्फ़िगरेशन होती हैं उसको मॉनिटर कर रहा होता है, रिकॉर्ड कर रहा होता है, और उसी की बेस पे जो है वो आपके पास कंसोल में शो हो रही होती है कि ये कंप्लाइंट है या नॉन कंप्लाइंट है. तो ऑटोमेटिक रेमिडिएशन भी इसमें अवेलेबल है. So if we look towards the AWS config features, basically it records details of changes to your AWS resources to provide you with configuration history. You can use AWS console, API or CLI to obtain these details of what resource configuration looked like at any point. It automatically delivers configuration history file to Amazon S3 bucket that you specify. Another feature is that it gives an enterprise-wide view of your AWS config rule compliance status, and you can associate your AWS organization to quickly add to your accounts. So you can easily see compliance status of multi-accounts and multi-regions. AWS config supports extensibility by allowing you to publish the configuration of third-party resources into AWS config using AWS public APIs. Examples of third-party resources include GitHub, Microsoft Active Directory resources, or any other on-premises server. You can also view and monitor the resource inventory and configuration history of these third-party resources. AWS config provide you with a configuration snapshot, a point-in-time capture of all resources and their configuration. These configuration snapshots are generated on demand via AWS CLI API and delivered to Amazon S3 bucket that you specify. It provides you a visual dashboard to help you quickly spot non-compliant resources and take appropriate actions. Administrators, security experts, and compliance officers can see a shared view of your AWS resources compliance posture from this dashboard. So if we go towards AWS config benefits, AWS config allow you to continuously audit and assess the overall compliance of your AWS resource with your organization policies and guidelines. It provides you the ability to define rules for provisioning and configuration AWS resources. With AWS config, you are able to record configuration changes of AWS resources. Config also enables you to inventory of your AWS resources as well as software configurations with EC2 at any point. Config also help you to identify the root cause of operational issues through its integration with CloudTrail. CloudTrail is a service that records events related to API calls of your account. AWS config is designed to be your primary tool to perform configuration audit and compliance verification, also for third-party resources. Let's look over to AWS config pricing. Its pricing is in terms of per configuration item recorded in your AWS account per region, which is 0.003 per configuration. You can stop recording configurations item at any time to stop AWS config billing. First 100,000 rules evaluations cost $0.001, and for next 400,000 rule evaluations it costs around $0.008. Yes, Abdullah.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, let's look into the next service we have here is Amazon Detective. You can get started with Amazon Detective with just few clicks, as all the other services in AWS. There is no software to need to be deployed or any data source to be enabled specifically to maintain your detective findings and results. The features we will look into the detective is it provides automatic ingest and process relevant data. Like you do not have to configure or enable any data sources. Amazon Detective collects these data from VPC flow logs and Amazon Guard Duty findings and CloudTrail events. It also provides the graph model, which is pre-built using machine learning and statistical analysis, graph theory. Like for example, it helps you to filter the malicious IPs and to filter the traffic. AWS management operations or unauthorized activity log data. Like these insight data, and these insights will help you to quickly validate and compare and correlate the data to reach your conclusions, and to solve these issues. Number third, with a unified view, you can visualize all the context and details in one place. It is easier to identify patterns and you can validate or invalidate according to the findings or security issues that are impacting your resources. Amazon Detective is integrated with AWS security services such as Guard Duty. You can also, like I have said this earlier, you can also use Detective to analyze or visualize your Guard Duty findings. It can also do the same for Security Hub, and as well as AWS partner security products like that, the products you have on Marketplace, AWS Marketplace. There is no software to deploy or any agents to be installed on the servers or any complex configurations required to maintain. Like you just have to enable the service on your AWS account and you are good to go. Benefits, Amazon Detective are, for example, Amazon Guard Duty findings, like if there is unusual login attempt or an unauthorized API call or an unauthorized API call from any unusual source, like it will just notify you. And basically the difference between Detective and the Guard Duty is Guard Duty detects and analyzes your your resources. Like it gets that finding and you can visualize it with the Detective, so it works together. The next benefit we have is continuous data updates. Like it saves times and efforts, and it organizes the data into graph model, like and summarizes all the security related relationships with respect to the data updates you have in your resources. And for example, if we move to the pricing section, it also charges you on the amount of data you utilize. For example, the first 1000 GB per account per region will cost you $2 for a whole month. So as I said it earlier, and I want to conclude that again, like the Guard Duty is your service to detect those findings, to detect those malicious suspicious activities, and you can use Detective to visualize those findings into a console. So yeah, so the next service, Security Hub. Junaid, can you please go ahead for this service too?
Yes, sure. AWS Security Hub is a compliance and security center. It gives you a comprehensive view of high priority security alerts and compliance status across AWS resources. In simple terms, as the name is Security Hub, which is the central location which collects security related data from across AWS accounts, services, and third-party partners. Simply, compliance management with built-in mapping capabilities for common frameworks like CIS framework, PCI, which is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, and AWS Foundational Security Best Practices, and more. So let's start with Security Hub features. Security Hub provides a set of automated security controls called AWS Foundational Security Best Practices Standard. It is a highly organized set of security best practices vetted by AWS security experts. You can have multiple AWS accounts. If you have multiple AWS accounts, you can connect and consolidate findings across those accounts with few clicks in the AWS Security Hub console. Integration with AWS organization allows you to automatically enable any account in your organization with Security Hub and AWS Foundational Security Best Practices Standard. Security Hubs also allow you to designate aggregated region and link some all regions to the aggregated region, give you a centralized view of findings across all your accounts and all your linked regions. Security Hub provides a simple 0 to 100 security score for each standard for each account across all enabled standards. So you have to enable the standard to get a score of your workload. A total score of all accounts associated with your administrator account. It means that you can see the aggregated score on your administrator account. Also, you can filter findings on severity based, like high or low severity. If we talk about Security Hub benefits, Security Hub supports integrations with Amazon Event Bridge to automate remediation of a specific finding. You can define a custom actions to take when finding is received. Security Hub automatically collects and consolidates findings from AWS services enabled in your environment that across all linked accounts in the region that can be seen on AWS Security Hub dashboard. So Security Hub automatically runs continuous account level configuration and security checks based on AWS best practices and security standards. So a Security Hub reduces the effort to collect and prioritize security findings across accounts from integrated service and third-party partner products. It then correlates findings across providers to prioritize the most important ones. Security Hub pricing. Security Hub pricing is based among two dimensions. One is the quantity of security checks, and the other one is quantity of ingested findings, which is associated with security checks. For security checks, first 100,000 checks per account per region per month cost is 0.0010, and for next 400 checks per account per region per month cost is 0.008. And if we talk about for ingested findings, first 10,000 events per account per region and per month are free. Over 10,000 events per account per region month is 0.00003 per event. So Abdullah,
Yes.
over to you.
So what we can say is AWS GuardDuty, Security Hub, and all other services work together. Like they have common features. They ingest and they use common data like flow log data and DNS flow logs and all of the logs we have stored in our S3. So yeah, so let's get to our last AWS service we will discuss today is AWS WAF.
So Abdullah, we have like 5 minutes left, so
okay, so I will wrap it quickly. So WAF is, as our partner or Abhi Finance, as Ejaz told us, they are already using WAF, and as also Kevin demonstrated the diagram that uses WAF to protect your environment from unusual accesses or resources. AWS WAF is a firewall provided by the AWS. It consists of web ACL rules, like the rules to deny and to approve type of data or type of access is trying to get into your AWS environment. So the features this service provides is it lets you create rules to filter web applications based on conditions that include IP addresses, HTTP headers. It also you can also use its bot control feature, like it is managed rule by AWS rule group actually, that gives you visibility into the control over common and usual or bot traffic that can access or that can consume your AWS resources. Like for example, mining, if someone is trying to use your AWS or EC2 instance for mining purposes, or causing some getting something into your EC2 instance, which can cause downtime or into your AWS EC2 instance. AWS WAF can completely administered by the APIs, like you do not have to log into the console every time. For example, if a developer has a detailed knowledge about the environment and about the web application, so they can create their own rules and deploy it into the AWS WAF as a rule set. So it can act on that rule set and can deny and approve according to the rules you have mentioned. You can get a real-time metrics in the AWS WAF console, and you can set alarms and CloudWatch logs for to store that data or to generate an alarm to your resources. You can centrally configure and manage WAF deployments using multiple AWS accounts by using Firewall Manager. It is a separate AWS service for firewall configurations, and it works accordingly with the WAF and other security services. And you can easily integrate that. This all, like it's a complete ecosystem for the security too, as well as for the other domains like compute or domain. So it integrates well within the AWS environment. The benefits you get is you can utilize managed rules. These are provided by the AWS too, and other third-party companies too. Like you can use FortiGate and other rule sets available for the AWS WAF specifically. You can get protection against web application attacks from file filtering attacks, and as I mentioned in the features and other previous features and details. You can monitor common bots attacks, or you can also rate limit. You can limit the bots so that they cannot utilize over the limit or below the limit. So it can actually get the below the limit, but it cannot cross the limit you have mentioned in your rules for the bots specifically. There is also an easy process to set up WAF. You do not have to deploy any configuration, or there are not any complex configurations to be set to use AWS WAF, and it is easy to maintain. Like if I share a use case, which is and actually happened, like we were get attacked from malicious IP, and guard duty. The WAF notified us that someone is trying to access your or you have an EC2 access from unusual geolocation, or someone is using your AWS credentials. So the last.
Abdullah, you need to wrap up.
Okay, so I will jump into the pricing. It is again charged on the basis of traffic or on the amount of data you utilize or you analyze by using AWS WAF. So if I get an example, like if you have one web ACL rule, you will be charged $5 per month for that, and the number of, for example, in that web ACL rule, you have sub rules, like there are 19 rules, you will be charged $1 for each, so $19 this and $5 for using web ACL. So total charges you will get at the end of the month is $30 per month. So because, for example, if I have per million data to be analyzed by WAF, you will be charged $30 per month for that. So yeah, this is over, and thank you everyone. I hope you get the points, and if you have any confusion between the services, like they all correlate with each other, so you can drop us an email and we will be happy to answer that.
Thank you, Abdullah and Junaid. A very informative session. Now I would request all the panelists, Kevin, Ejaz, to join us in the Q&A. We have got plenty of questions from the audience, and that's very encouraging. Some of the questions has been already answered by Ejaz and Kevin. So Kevin, Ejaz, can you please turn on your camera? Thank you. So first one, one of the audience has actually asked directly from Ejaz, what do you suggest the minimum level of security? I think you've already answered that in the chat box. If you can just tell all the other audience about it as well.
Right. Well, the minimum level actually depends upon organization to organization based upon their offerings. But I would strongly recommend AWS well-architected framework security pillars. These are the ones that we should focus bare minimum. And when you implement these, at the very first time, you will freak out. Trust me. Because all of a sudden, you will get hundreds of issues coming up. And you will feel like you have opened probably a Pandora box that you shouldn't have opened at all, right? But you don't need to be worried about, because if you will dig down, you will find that if you these are the ripples of the same issue at multiple levels. So if you address one thing, it will fix maybe 20 anomalies. So with that, you can achieve the well-architected framework security pillar. This is the that I would strongly recommend for everyone. Rest is up to every organization upon their own offerings and the situations.
Great, thank you. The ground reality experience speaking up. So this one is for Kevin. For my on-prem infrastructure, can I utilize AWS security services to set up regular scanning of servers endpoints? Yeah, you're mute.
Yes, if you are looking to scan your on-prem servers, I believe Amazon Inspector, what you can do is that you can scan your scan your image before exporting it and then deploying it to your on-prem. But that may not be the best for you. But but I would say that Amazon Inspector would be the most relevant service there.
Okay, I think that they must be having something hybrid. That's why they've asked from the on-prem. So yeah, makes sense. And what if a hybrid environment? Oh, exactly. This is the same next question he has asked. If I have a hybrid environment of on-prem and cloud infrastructure, can I utilize AWS security services to set up regular scanning of servers endpoints? I think.
Sorry,
Inspector.
I guess that you mentioned service endpoints, right? So you're looking at an endpoint detection, So for I guess internal AWS environment, you can use services like Guard Duty, because Guard Duty looks at your VPC flow logs. But if you are looking at outside of the AWS environment, you would most likely need to use a third-party service.
Third-party service. Okay,
yes.
Great. Next one is, how can we prevent DDoS attacks? I would request Abdullah if you can.
You can prevent DDoS attacks by using AWS Shield, but it is quite expensive service from AWS. But the other AWS services, if you set up environments according to the AWS frameworks and well-architected frameworks and everything else we have discussed here, like it can prevent some of that part. But if you want to prevent that on enterprise level and you want to be sure 100%, then I would suggest you can use third-party services, or you can use AWS Shield to prevent DDoS attack.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
I just want to add
Yeah.
to that is that AWS provides Shield standard for free. You don't need to turn it on, and I will also AWS Shield Advanced is the one that you do need to pay for. It provides extra protection. It is a bit pricey. Apart from that, I've also put in the chat a white paper for DDoS resiliency. There's like what was mentioned. There's a lot of different avenues you can take.
Thanks, Kevin,
Okay.
for holding on me. I forgot
Okay.
that part, that standard and
Okay.
advanced. Thank you.
No issues. Next one is for Ejaz. What is Abhi Private Limited, and what limitations you have faced as a fintech using cloud?
We are not exactly the lending. We are not a lending platform, but we work in a similar way. The key challenges for fintechs are usually that you have to go through the regulations, the regulatory challenges, and you'll have to see that or not. Because in the end, you will be saving your customers' data. It may include their personal information, the financial information, things like that, right? And this data will most likely at this point in time will be outside your geographic boundaries, unless you have the AWS data center in your region. So like in case of Pakistan, we don't have a data center here, right? So this is the key area. So you will have to go through the regulation and see how these are applicable at your line of business. Like if you are a bank, most likely the regulator won't allow you. But if you're a fintech, yes, you can.
Okay, I think that clears it up. This one is for you, Kevin. Are AWS security updates applied automatically, or is notification sent for the client to choose on whether to apply upgrades protocols for their designated resources?
I see. Great question. So going back to the shared responsibility model, so if it's a managed service like Lambda or RD, if it's an extracted service like Lambda or DynamoDB, those will be applied automatically. If it's something like RDS, then there will be certain there are certain patches which will be applied automatically, but something like a database engine version, that is something you can choose. For something like EC2, you will need to patch that yourself, and I don't believe AWS provides any notification to you when a new patch is released. But for EC2 specifically, we have a service called Systems Manager which has a feature called Patch Manager, which you can use to automate your patching.
Okay. I think we are almost up to the time, but again, the last one, I'll take this up. By what mechanism does AWS ensure that upcoming new threats, for example, ransomware, do not impact my acquired allocated resources? Again, I think, Kevin, you are the best to answer.
Yes, so going after what I mentioned and what Ejaz also brought up, shared responsibility model is the most important here. So if, for example, you're using, so AWS already uses, if you turn on things like guard duty, that one already already takes in threat intelligence feeds from Proofpoint and FireEye to secure your environment. Ransomware, for your resources itself, ransomware is something that you will need to protect yourself against. We have a public resource, I'll put it in the chat as well, on how to secure yourself against ransomware. But like what is mentioned in the shared responsibility model, customer data, that is your responsibility, and you will need to protect that against ransomware, and AWS will guide you with all the best practices you can use to put that in place.
Okay, thank you. So rest of the questions, we would be responding you back through emails because we are running out of time. Let me just wrap this up. for those who are interested to have a free security assessment done by AWS and INIT team, you can book your slots through this link. I'll be pasting the URL in the chat box as well. So for everyone, here we go. So this is the link. You can register your slot. It's on first come, first serve basis. So don't miss that opportunity. So this concludes our today's webinar. We hope you had fun, and we hope to see you soon at our future webinars. Again, for any question, please reach out to us on this email address given on the screens. We hope you all stay safe and that you have a good day ahead. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.